Hey everyone, if you caught my last episode, you know it's been a heavy few weeks. Between surveillance creeping further into everyday life, the growing anxiety around AI, and the heartbreak moving through the world at once, it can start to feel like there is nowhere quite left to stand. Maybe you've been carrying around some of that weight too. Maybe it's followed you around after you close the apps, or sat beside you in the silence when the day finally stops asking things of you. So, before we step into today's story, let's take one small breath together. Unclench your jaw, let your shoulders drop, not because the breath fixes any of it, but because you deserve a moment inside your body. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. And let it go. Today, we're making room for grief, but we're also making room for what remains after someone has gone. The kindness they set in motion, the people they made feel seen, the doors they opened, the stories that kept walking around the world long after their teller has left the room. Because Dolly Parton, Tim Curry, and Hayden Panettiere did not simply leave behind careers. They left behind legacies shaped by care. Dolly built world for children to enter. Tim made room for the strange ones to recognize themselves. And Hayden chose honesty about pain so other people feel less alone inside their own. Their work could not have looked more different, but each of them spent their life leaving something warm behind for people they would never meet. There's an old belief that when a great performer dies, the performance does not end. It simply slips loose in the dark and goes looking for somewhere else to live. Dolly gave us Rhinestones, the nerve to become larger than life that first contained us. Tim gave us red lips, the freedom to be strange without asking for forgiveness. And Hayden gave us superpowers, the courage to be tender in a world that mistakes hardness for strength. 3 offerings, 3 strange little talismans. And today, we're going to hold them up into the light. Welcome to my latest fixation. I'm Joshua, and I have a habit of digging into things that don't quite make sense. Think of this as a cabinet of curiosities for the beautifully bizarre. From lonely cryptids wandering through the static, to horror, gaming, obscure history, and the strange little piece of human connection. This is where we take a closer look at all the odd little things that don't quite add up. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's see where this one takes us. Every good fairy tale begins in a cabin in the woods. Dolly Rebecca Parton's began in a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, deep in the Smoky Mountains of Sevier County, Tennessee. She was one of 12 children, born into a family she would later describe as dirt poor but rich in love. It is the sort of beginning that sounds too neat for real life. A little girl in the mountains, singing into the hills, writing songs on scraps of paper, dreaming of some place beyond the ridge. But Dolly made a career out of reminding us that the most unbelievable stories are often the true ones. Before she was 10, she was already singing on local radio. Before she was out of high school, she had packed what she owned into a cardboard suitcase and headed for Nashville. There's something wonderfully mythic about that image. A young woman with a box of belongings, a road ahead of her, and a voice too big for the place that first taught her how to use it. Nashville did not hand her a crown. Dolly built one herself. Song by song, joke by joke, rhinestone by rhinestone. And the rhinestones matter, not because they were shallow or silly or simply part of a costume. They were a declaration. Dolly understood that you could make yourself dazzling on purpose, that you could turn the things that people might dismiss, the accent, the wigs, the sparkle, the excess, into a very thing no one could ever forget. She wore glamour like armor, but she never made it a wall. She made it a welcome sign. And then there were the songs. Jolene, Here You Come Again, 9 to 5, I Will Always Love You, Coat of Many Colors. Titles so familiar they almost feel like old friends. Songs people have sung in kitchens and cars, at weddings, after breakups. after funerals, in the middle of ordinary days that need a little more courage. Dolly could write a song that sounded plain until it quietly broke your heart. She understood longing. She understood work. She understood the particular ache of wanting a life that seemed to belong to someone else. And she understood that a good chorus could be a rope thrown across a hard stretch of water. Over the decades, she became one of country music's defining voices. Not only a singer, but a songwriter, musician, actor, author, businesswoman, and builder of worlds. She carried her Tennessee roots into every room she entered, never sanding down the accent, the sparkle, or the humor that made people underestimate her at their own peril. In 1980, she made her film debut in 9 to 5, alongside Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, and made herself impossible to ignore. The title song became an anthem for exhausted, underpaid workers everywhere, and earned Dolly an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. Years later, Traveling Through, written for Transamerica, earned a second Oscar nomination. The honors eventually became almost too numerous to count. Dolly earned 10 competitive Grammy Awards from 55 nominations, and the Recording Academy gave her its Lifetime Achievement Award in 2011. Both Jolene and I Will Always Love You entered the Grammy Hall of Fame, two songs from the same woman, now preserved among the recordings that helped shape American music. Country music welcomed her into its Hall of Fame in 1999. Then, in 2022, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame included her too. Though Dolly initially tried to withdraw from consideration, saying she did not feel she had earned that right. So, Dolly being Dolly, she went and made an entire rock album. In 2023, at 77 years old, she released Rockstar, a 30-track record filled with originals and collaborations with Stevie Nicks, Elton John, Debbie Harry, Lizzo, Rob Halford, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr. It debuted at number 1 on Billboard's Top Rock Albums chart. Dolly did not simply accept a place in rock and roll. She arrived wearing rhinestones, brought a chorus of legends with her, and made sure no one can question whether she belonged. Her trophies mattered because they were proof of mastery, but the real wonder was that she never treated success as a locked room with her name on the door. Dolly became enormous without becoming distant, and perhaps nowhere is that more visible than Dollywood. In 1986, Dolly came home to the Smoky Mountains and put her name on a place built for joy. Not as a trophy for the girl who had gotten out, but as a promise to come back with something in her hands. Dollywood began as a reimagining of an existing Pigeon Forge park, but Dolly's name changed its orbit almost immediately. In its very first year, more than 1.3 million people came through the gates, about a 75% jump from the year before. And it kept growing. By the 2020s, Dollywood had become the largest employee in Sevier County, more than 4,000 people directly, and helping support more than 23,000 jobs across the region. Its economic impact was estimated at more than $1.8 billion each year. Those are enormous numbers, but what they mean in plain human terms is this: thousands of people got to make a living in the mountains they call home. That matters because Dolly knew what it meant to come from a place that outsiders could mistake for small. She knew that Appalachia was often treated like scenery, a punchline, and somewhere to leave behind if you wanted a bigger life. So, she made the world come to East Tennessee instead. She gave visitors roller coasters and cinnamon bread, gospel music and bluegrass, craftspeople at work and lights in the trees. But beneath all of this was a quieter act of devotion. She helped create a future in the place that had first given her a voice. Dolly did not just put a spotlight on the mountains. She helped make sure people living beneath the spotlight had work, opportunity, and reasons to stay. And still, for all the rides and music and millions of people passing through the gates, the legacy she seemed to hold the closest was quieter. It arrived in a mailbox. It had a child's name written on the label, and inside was a book. In 1995, Dolly founded the Imagination Library in Sevier County, Tennessee, the place that had made her. The idea was almost impossibly simple. Every enrolled child would receive a book, age appropriate, in the mail each month from birth until they began school. No income requirement, no test to pass, no catch, just a book addressed to that child arriving at their home like a small and faithful promise. The program began in honor of Dolly's father, Robert Lee Parton, who never learned to read or write. Dolly understood what that had cost him, not because it made him any less intelligent or any less beloved, but because the world made certain doors harder to open when words have been kept from you. So she did what she always had done. She took something painful and made it useful. She took one man's unfinished dream and turned it into an invitation for millions of children. What began in one East Tennessee county grew far beyond the hills. By 2023, the Imagination Library had given away its 200 millionth book. In 2024, roughly 1 in 7 American children under 5 was enrolled. And by this year, the program had sent more than 300 million books into the world. More than 3 million each month. Across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia. 300 million books. It is such a large number that it almost stops sounding real. So, let's make it smaller. Picture one child, 4 years old maybe. A package appears in the mailbox with their name on it. Not the parents', but theirs. Inside it is a story. A rabbit, a bear, a dragon. A child who goes somewhere impossible and comes home changed. Maybe it's the first book they own. Maybe it's the one they ask to hear until the corners soften and the pages begin to come loose. Maybe it's the first time someone has said without saying out loud, "There is a whole world waiting for you." That is what Dolly built. Not a monument to herself, a ritual of possibility. A book arriving each month in a child's own name, before the world had too many chances to tell them that their dreams are too big. The Library of Congress recognized the program with its David Rubenstein Prize in 2021. But the truest award is harder to put on a shelf. Millions of children growing up with stories close at hand because Dolly decided that imagination belongs to everybody. And maybe that was her greatest rhinestone of all. Not the sparkle itself, but the way she scattered it. Not a jewel locked away in a case, but a light passed from one small pair of hands to another. Dolly gave the world songs it will be singing long after the last encore. She gave her mountains a place to gather, work, and be proud of themselves. She gave children, many of whom will never know the full shape of her story, a book with their own name waiting in the mailbox. That is a legacy with roots. It does not need to be tinted into existence. It was planted in love, carried forward by the people who received it, and passed from hand to hand. And maybe that's the real lesson tucked beneath all those rhinestones. Becoming larger is not about taking up all the space in the room. It's about making the room larger for someone else. Dolly Parton knew how to shine, and she knew how to make room for other people to shine too. Dolly's gift was abundance. Songs, laughter, work, books, and a light left burning for whomever came next. Tim's gift was transformation. He showed us that the strange was never something to outgrow. Sometimes it's the truest part of you. There are performers who disappear into a role. And then there are performers like Tim Curry, who seem to invite the role in, hand it a drink, and ask what trouble it had planned for the evening. Timothy James Curry was born on April 19th, 1946, in Grapon Hall, Cheshire, England. He grew up the son of a Royal Navy chaplain and a school secretary, raised in a way between the pulpit and the classroom. Two old institutions, two places with their own rules about how a person ought to behave. Perhaps that's why he spent a lifetime slipping so beautifully past the rules. He trained as an actor and singer and entered the London theater world in the late 1960s. His early stage work included Hair, the counterculture rock musical that arrived with long hair, bare skin, loud music, and absolutely no interest in behaving itself. There, he met Richard O'Brien, a fellow performer with a strange little sci-fi musical about an alien scientist, a haunted castle, and the deliciously dangerous business of becoming someone new. That role was Dr. Frankenfurter. In 1973, Tim Curry originated the character in the Rocky Horror Show, then carried him from London to Los Angeles Broadway, and finally into the Rocky Horror Picture Show in 1975. And from the moment he stepped into those fishnets, that corset, and that impossible red lipstick, something shifted. Frankenfurter was not safe. He was not tidy. He was funny, seductive, cruel, vulnerable, outrageous, theatrical, and fully aware that the room was watching. Tim did not play them as a joke. He played them like a storm in heels. For audiences who spent their lives being told to make themselves smaller, quieter, less strange, there was suddenly this figure on the screen refusing every one of those instructions. The red lips were not a costume. They were a signal. And that signal traveled. The Rocky Horror Picture Show did not become a cult classic because it was polished or respectable. It became a ritual. At midnight screenings, people came dressed as characters, shouted lines back at the screens, threw rice, waved newspaper, danced in the aisles, and found one another. For a lot of people, especially the kids who felt out of step with the world around them, it was not simply a movie. It was proof that there were other people out there speaking the same strange language. But Tim Curry was never going to be contained by one pair of fishnets. That would have been far too simple. He moved through the roles the way a shapeshifter moves through moonlight. Never quite the same person twice, but always unmistakably himself. In Annie, he played Rooster Hannigan, a singing, dancing conman with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. In Clue, he became Wadsworth, the frantic butler at the center of a murder mystery, racing through a mansion at such speed that it feels like he's trying to outrun the entire plot. In 1985's Legend, hidden beneath horns and red skin as the Lord of Darkness, he turned into the devil into something grand, lonely, and almost heartbreakingly theatrical. He did not just play monsters, he gave them appetite, sorrow, vanity, and a strange kind of glamour. Then in 1990, he climbed out of the storm drain and into a generation's nightmares. In the television adaptation of Stephen King's It, Tim played Pennywise the Dancing Clown, a creature built from the oldest trick in the horror book. Take something meant to delight children, then let it smile too long. Pennywise was funny until he wasn't. He was silly until the silliness curdled. And Tim knew exactly how to balance that line. His Pennywise could lure you in with a balloon, a bright voice, a little joke, and then suddenly make you feel as if the whole room had gone cold. For so many people, this was the clown under their bed, the one in the storm drain, the face that made birthday parties feel faintly suspicious for years afterwards. He made Pennywise unforgettable, not just because he played him as a simple monster, but because he understood that the most frightening things often wear a familiar face. Now, I can comment on this one personally. Pennywise scared the crap out of me as a kid. Still kind of does, but Tim's version of Pennywise lived in my nightmares for years. And then there was Muppet Treasure Island. As Long John Silver, he sang, swaggered, plotted, treated every scene like a pirate ship was the finest theater in the world. He could be terrifying, he could be ridiculous, he could be tender. Sometimes he managed all three before lunch. Tim's voice became its own kind of creature, too. Rich, velvet, razor-edged, instantly recognizable. He voiced Nigel Thornberry in The Wild Thornberrys, the polluted spirit Hexus in Ferngully, and dozens of other characters that followed children into living rooms and stayed there for decades. And all the while, he remained a serious creature on the stage. Broadway recognized him with 3 Tony Award nominations: Amadeus, My Favorite Year, and Spamalot. That was Tim Curry's real magic. He never asked us to choose which version of him was the real one. The monster, the butler, the pirate, the clown, the devil, the voice in the cartoon, the man in lipstick under the stage lights. He let them all stand together. He made contradiction feel less like confusion and more like freedom. In 2012, Tim Curry suffered a major stroke. The man whose body had carried so much of his work, the stride, the grin, the dramatic flourish, the perfect little tilt of a head, lost the use of his legs and began using a wheelchair. His speech was affected too. For an actor whose instrument had always seemed so complete, voice, face, body, timing, all moving together like all the same spell, it was a devastating change. But Tim remained persistent, and he remained present. He continued voice work, he appeared at fan conventions, he sat with audiences, answered their questions, signed their memorabilia, and accepted the love that had been coming towards him for decades. In 2015, he appeared publicly to receive a Lifetime Achievement honor for the Actors Fund. There is a particular kind of courage in staying visible after your life changes. Not pretending the loss never happened, not becoming a tidy inspiration story for strangers, just continuing to exist in public as yourself after the body has rewritten the rules. Tim Curry has spent his career proving that a person could contain multitudes. After the stroke, he showed us another kind of truth. A life can shape without becoming smaller. The performer remained, the voice remained, and the mischief remained. And so did the signal he had sent out all those years before, in fishnets and Red's lipstick, to anyone who ever wondered whether there was room in this world for someone like them. That's the thing about Tim Curry. He never seemed interested in teaching anyone how to be normal. Thank heaven for that. He showed us that you could be funny and frightening. You could be elegant and absurd. You could be a monster, a romantic, a villain, a fool, a pirate, a clown, and still be deeply, unmistakably human. For the people who found him at exactly the right time, late at night, maybe, watching a battered DVD or a rerun with the volume turned low, he was more than an actor. He was kind of like a signal fire, a strange, glittering thing at the edge of the woods saying, "Come closer, you're not the only one." The red lips were never about fitting in. They were about refusing to disappear. Tim Curry gave so many people the freedom to be more fully themselves, not by telling what they should become, but by showing them how much a person could contain. And he did it with a grin, a velvet voice, and just enough menace to make the invitation feel dangerous. Dolly gave us abundance, Tim gave us transformation. And then there was Hayden Panettiere, a young woman the world first knew as a girl who could not be hurt, who later found a far braver kind of strength in letting people see that she had been. There is a particular kind of cruelty in growing up on camera. When people first meet you as a child, they begin to believe they own a piece of your growing up. Your face becomes familiar before you've had time to become familiar to yourself. Your mistakes become headlines. Your pain becomes something strangers feel entitled to inspect. Hayden Leslie Panettiere was born on August 21st, 1989 in Palisades, New York. She appeared in her first commercial when she was just 11 months old. Before she was 5, she was already working on a soap opera, One Life to Live. For most of her life, the camera was there. She grew up in front of an audience through films like Remember the Titans and Bring It On, All or Nothing, learning how to deliver a line, find her mark, and perform joy long before most people her age had decided what they wanted to be. Then, in 2006, at 17 years old, she became Claire Bennet on Heroes. Claire was a high school cheerleader who discovered that she could heal from almost any injury. She could fall, break, burn, bleed, and then get right back up. The show turned her into the center of one of the biggest television catchphrases of the era. Save the cheerleader, save the world. It was a strange part to play when you had spent your whole life being watched, a young woman whose power was that nothing could hurt her for long. And for a while, that's how many people knew Hayden, the cheerleader who could not die. But Hayden was never only one role. After Heroes, she stepped into another kind of survival story, horror. In 2011's Screen 4, she played Kirby Reed, The sharp, funny, movie-literate friend who knew the rules, knew the references, and was clever enough to understand that knowing you're in a horror movie does not necessarily mean you get to walk away from it. Kirby became a fan favorite almost immediately. She was quick, capable, a little chaotic, and gloriously unimpressed by anyone trying to explain horror movies to her. For years, fans kept asking the question horror fans always ask when they love someone enough. Did she make it? And spoiler alert, eventually she did. Hayden returned as Kirby in Scream 6 in 2023, bringing the character back more than a decade later, not as a nostalgic cameo, but as someone who had survived and carried the story with her. But before Kirby came back, Hayden had already helped tell one of the most unsettling survival stories of modern horror. In 2015, she played Sam Giddings in Until Dawn, the interactive horror game where every choice can decide who lives through the night. Sam was smart, steady, compassionate, and brave without ever needing to be invincible. Hayden brought real weight to the performance, not just through voice acting, but through motion capture that made Sam feel uncannily present. And because Until Dawn gave players control over its branching story, Sam's survival was not guaranteed. Players had to protect her. They had to make choices for her. They had to sit with the consequences when fear made the wrong decision feel like it was the only one available. They made her different from Claire Bennet, the cheerleader who healed from anything. Sam could be lost. That vulnerability was exactly what made players fight so hard to keep her alive. And then came Nashville. As Juliette Barnes, Hayden played a young country star with the talent enough to fill a stadium and wounds deep enough to make every victory feel complicated. Juliette was ambitious, difficult, funny, selfish, frightened, and fiercely alive. The kind of character who could have just been reduced to a cliche in lesser hands. Hayden gave her edges. She gave her a pulse. The role earned Hayden 2 Golden Globe nominations and allowed her to bring together so many things she had been practicing since childhood. Acting, singing, vulnerability, and the ability to make a flawed person feel painfully real. Across Heroes, Scream, Until Dawn, and Nashville, she kept returning to people who were expected to be tougher than they felt. A cheerleader who healed, a horror survivor who knew every rule, a woman trapped on a mountain with the night closing in, a young performer trying to hold herself together beneath the bright, unforgettable light of fame. Maybe that's why those performances stayed with people. Hayden knew how to play strength without pretending strength meant never being afraid. And eventually, Hayden began to speak about what strength had cost her off-screen. In 2014, she became a mother to her daughter, Kaya. Afterward, she experienced severe postpartum depression, a condition that can make a time the world insists should be joyful feel frighteningly alone instead. In the years that followed, she spoke with an increasingly honesty about depression, anxiety, addiction, treatment, and the long work of recovery. She did not make it neat. She did not turn it into a pretty little lesson with a bow tied around it. She spoke about how hard it was to recognize herself, how pain could become a cycle, how shame could make asking for help feel impossible. And she spoke about it at a time when many women were still being handed a very narrow script. Be grateful, be glowing, be happy, be quiet about the part that hurts. On Nashville, her character Juliette Barnes was given a postpartum depression storyline that echoed what Hayden herself was living through. It was not easy material. It was not distant material. But Hayden brought it to the screen with the kind of rawness that can only come from someone who understands that territory too well. Then in May 2026, Hayden published her memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning. In it, she reclaimed her story on her own terms. The child stardom, the tabloid scrutiny, the trauma, the postpartum depression, the addiction, the recovery, the losses that fractured her life, and the difficult work of building herself again afterwards. There's a word worth lingering on, reclaiming. For so long, other people had told versions of Hayden's story for her. Headlines, gossip, photographs, assumptions made from a distance. In her book and in the interviews surrounding it, she chose to speak in her own voice. Not because she owed strangers every detail, but because she knew the truth can become a hand reaching through the dark. Her real superpower was not that she could not be hurt. It was that she let people see that she had been hurt, and that she refused to let the wound be the final word. Hayden Panettiere was 36 years old. That is far too young. There's no prettier sentence for it. No clever turn of phrase that can make it feel less cruel. We met her as a child. We watched her become a cheerleader who could heal, a survivor who knew the rules, a young woman stranded on a mountain where every choice mattered, a singer trying to survive the bright and hungry machine of fame. And then, when it would have been easier to disappear behind the version of herself the world already knew, she did something harder. She told the truth. She told the people that pain could live behind a smile, that motherhood could be complicated, that addiction and mental illness are not moral failures, that recovery is not a straight line, and that being soft, being frightened, imperfect, and grieving uncertain does not make anyone weak. There will be people who heard her speak and recognize themselves. A new mother sitting in the dark, wondering why she feels so alone. Someone who tries to ask to help before a bad night becomes a worse one. Someone who has to spend years performing fine because they don't know what else to do. Hayden left those people something more useful than a perfect ending. She left them permission to be honest. The girl who could not be hurt taught us that surviving is not the same thing as being untouched. Sometimes survival is simply telling the truth about where it hurt and letting someone else know that they're not alone. Dolly taught us to become larger without forgetting where we came from. Tim taught us to become stranger without an apology. Hayden taught us that softness can be its own strength. 3 different grifts and 3 different lights still traveling outward. So, what do we do with a week like this? What do we do when the world loses 3 people who seemed in their own ways too vivid to leave it? Maybe we keep what they gave us. From Dolly, the Rhinestones, not merely the sparkle, though she gave us plenty of that. The audacity underneath it. The belief that you can come from a small place, survive hard things, become enormous, and still use that largeness to make room for someone else. Dolly left songs. She left a park in the mountains that brought work and wonder home with it. She left millions of books traveling from mailbox to mailbox, each one carrying a child's name and a doorway into another world. From Tim, the red lips, the defiant reminder that there is no prize for being less strange than you are. That camp can be sacred. The monsters can be marvelous. That a mask is not always a hiding place. Sometimes it's the first honest thing you ever put on. Tim left us 100 faces and one unmistakable voice. He left us the devil and the clown, the pirate and the butler, the bad scientist, and the glorious, dangerous invitation to become more fully ourselves. From Hayden, the superpowers. Not the kind that keep every wound from landing, but the kind that let you name the wound and live anyway. The kind that says softness is not surrender. Vulnerability is not failure. Asking for help is not the opposite of strength. Hayden left us characters who kept fighting through the night, and she left us honesty. Proof that a person can carry pain, speak it out loud, and make the path a little less lonely for whoever comes after. They were not the same. They belonged to different stages, different generations, different kind of stories. But all 3 widened the doorway for someone else. Someone watching from a bedroom, someone driving home from after a bad day, someone who had been told they were too loud, too odd, too fragile, too much. And maybe that's what the rare ones do. They leave behind more than work. They leave behind permission. And, of course, no one episode could hold everything that they were. Not every role Tim transformed, every song Dolly wrote, every person Hayden reached, every act of kindness, every little strange moment someone carries close to their heart. A life this full will always spill over the edges of the story. So, I would love to hear yours. What did Dolly Parton, Tim Curry, or Hayden Panettiere mean to you? Was it a song you heard at exactly the right moment? A midnight screening? Or a character you fought to keep alive? An interview that made you feel less alone? Send me your favorite memory, your favorite performance, your favorite strange little piece of legacy. Write to me, message me, find me wherever the show lives online. Let's keep telling the stories they left with us. Some artists give us rhinestones. Some give us red lips. some give us superpowers. And somehow, years later, we find those gifts still waiting for us. In the song we sing too loudly, and the costume we finally have the nerve to wear, in the moment we tell the truth because someone else showed us how. So, thank you, Dolly. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Hayden. Take care of each other out there, and leave a light on for the strange ones. And just like that, this week's obsession comes to an end. Thanks for getting wonderfully lost with me. If you'd like to keep this cozy corner of the strange alive, everything you need is waiting in the notes below. Or head over to my website, mylatestfixation.com, where the magic quietly hums. You can browse peculiar merch, learn the story behind the show, or leave a little offering. Spend $50 or more and you'll get free shipping. Have a dark history footnote, a lonely cryptid, or digital mystery you think I absolutely need to fixate on? Send your thoughts via carrier pigeon, if you can find one with a good sense of direction. Otherwise, the website works much better. And if you enjoyed your stay, share the show with another kindred spirit. That's how our tiny, haunted hearth keeps growing. Stay curious, stay obsessed, and stay human.